On a seemingly ordinary day, on June 1st, 1986, 16-year-old Elaine Doyle ventured out for a night of fun with her friends at Greenock Celtic Supporters Club. Little did she know that this would be her last outing. The club, originally established as a charitable organization for the impoverished in Glasgow's East End, was the backdrop for a chilling mystery that unfolded that night. In the quiet town of Greenock, Scotland, Elaine disappeared without a trace, leaving her family completely unaware of the impending tragedy. The following morning, the town awoke to the sound of sirens and police cars, as everyone grappled with the question of what could have happened to this young woman during the short 15-minute journey from the club to her home. Was she deliberately targeted? And if so, what could anyone possibly have against a teenage girl? The roots of Greenock, Scotland can be traced back to 1711, when a fishing community laid claim to the land. Over the next 2 centuries, the village flourished into a bustling port and industrial hub. During World War II, it even served as a French naval base. With its rich history, the picturesque town attracts many tourists. However, despite its allure, Greenock is not particularly known for its security. Sadly, Elaine Doyle's case was just one of many tragedies that occurred during that time. Elaine was the cherished daughter of Maureen and Jack Doyle, with her brother John being her only sibling. She was a bright and optimistic young girl. She always looked towards the future. At the age of 16, when she vanished, she was already working at a jewelry store. Thanks to her warm and inviting personality, she had a vast circle of friends. Among her citizens band, named CB Radio Friends, she was affectionately known as the Golden Girl due to her affinity for the color yellow. On June 1st, 1986, Elaine had gone to the Greenock Celtic Supporters Club to enjoy a night out with these same friends. Her compassionate nature and friendly demeanor often led her to volunteer at social clubs like this one. She informed her mother that she would be returning home late that night, around midnight. However, when Elaine didn't arrive even after the expected time, Maureen, trusting her daughter's judgment, simply assuming that she had stayed over at a friend's house for the night. It wasn't until the morning of June 2nd that the family would wake up to devastating news. As Maureen opened her living room curtains, she was met with the sight of numerous police cars parked outside in the neighborhood. Later, she would discover that a local resident had stumbled upon a body dumped on a lane across Ardgowan Street, where Elaine resided, during his morning walk at 7:30 a.m. Due to the close-knit nature of the town, he immediately recognized Elaine's face. Horrified, he promptly contacted the police. The responsibility of delivering the tragic news to the family fell upon the police. The family was shattered upon identifying the lifeless body. No parent should ever have to witness the state in which Elaine's corpse was found. Her body bore severe bruising, particularly evident as deep purple marks along her neck. She was completely unclothed, with only a bra attached to her arm. However, her clothes were neatly folded and placed beside her. Given the visible bruising on her neck, the police suspected that strangulation was the likely cause of death. Additionally, the presence of a black eye led the investigating officers to believe that Elaine had fought back against her attacker. Upon receiving the autopsy report, their suspicions were confirmed as the cause of death was officially determined to be asphyxia due to strangulation by ligature. The autopsy findings also indicated that Elaine was likely strangled while facing downwards, with the culprit tightening the ligature from behind her neck. Forensic scientist Pauline McSorley, who conducted the autopsy, discovered DNA evidence on Elaine's face and chest. Additionally, broken pieces of bracelets and chunks of hair were found near the body. The presence of extensive bruising and defensive wounds further supported the police's belief that a struggle had taken place between the culprit and the victim. Unfortunately, the crime scene had not been properly handled, with evidence being mishandled without protective gear. As a result, over 41 DNA samples were found at the scene, all of which were accounted for except for one. It was theorized that this remaining unaccounted sample belonged to the culprit. Through questioning Elaine's friends in the neighborhood, the authorities were able to establish her whereabouts until midnight, when she was with her friend Lynn McCurdy. They had separated from their other friends to buy hamburgers, making them the last known individuals to have seen Elaine alive. After that point, none of her friends reported seeing her again. A local girl claimed to have heard loud screams around 12:40 a.m., but no further useful details were available to the authorities. The severity of the incident and the extent of abuse suggested a possible sexual motive behind the attack. The detectives successfully located Elaine's handbag outside the Watt Library on Union Street on June 9th. The bag had been severely burned, indicating an attempt to destroy any potential evidence. The case of Elaine Doyle is renowned as one of the most extensive manhunts in Scotland's history. It involved conducting numerous interviews and compiling a suspect list that exceeded 700 individuals. Despite these efforts, the investigators were unable to identify the perpetrator. Even after exploring multiple leads and conducting numerous interviews, the investigators remained no closer to solving the heinous crime. Eventually, the case went cold as no new leads emerged. Over the years, Elaine's parents and the entire community anxiously awaited answers. The case remained a perplexing mystery, and hope began to fade. However, in 2012, nearly 28 years after Elaine's death, renewed interest in the case arose when investigators stumbled upon old case files. They discovered that John Doherty, a person of interest mentioned in the reports, had never been interviewed. Several witnesses had sighted him near the crime scene on the night of the incident. Intrigued by this revelation, the investigators decided to pursue it further. Upon further inquiry, they found that Doherty had even been mentioned in a statement during the initial investigation, but for unknown reasons, he was never questioned. Although the detectives did not have high expectations due to the significant passage of time, they felt compelled to speak with him in order to tie up loose ends. Doherty, who was 21 years old at the time of the incident, initially claimed that he was at his parents' house in Greenock. However, under further police questioning, he eventually admitted to being at the disco on the night of the incident. In order to fulfill their final requirement, the police requested a DNA sample from Doherty, which he willingly provided. The shock was overwhelming once the police inputted the information into the database. It was revealed that John Doherty's DNA was a perfect match to the one found at the crime scene and on Elaine Doyle's body. Born in 1964 and residing in Dunoon, Argyll in Scotland, Doherty had previously served as a soldier before retiring and becoming a bus driver. On the surface, his life seemed ordinary, with a long-term relationship and a daughter. However, everything was about to change as his past crimes finally caught up with him. Following the confirmation of his DNA, Doherty was promptly arrested and later convicted on June 17, 2014, after a 52-day trial. Leading the prosecution was John Scodian. The authorities were able to gather enough evidence based on the extent and location of Elaine's injuries. It was deduced that she had been forcefully grabbed by the hair, struck on the head, and dragged into the lane where she was assaulted and ultimately found. The presence of Doherty's DNA at the crime scene further supported the claim that he had been with her that fateful night. The prosecution painted a vivid picture for the jury, reconstructing the events of the incident through a compelling narrative. They alleged that Doherty had caught Elaine off guard, forcibly removed her clothing, and then strangled her from behind with a ligature while she lay face down on the ground. Fortunately, the police were able to locate a witness named Martin Brown, who came forward to testify and provide additional credibility to their case. According to Brown, he had allegedly witnessed Doherty following Elaine into the lane, appearing angry as he trailed behind her. John Doherty refuted all of these allegations and enlisted the services of QC Donald Findlay to mount his defense. Findlay skillfully presented a counter-argument against the DNA evidence, asserting that it was insufficient and should not be deemed a reliable source of proof. He contended that due to the evidence being stored away for more than 2 decades, there was a high possibility of contamination or tampering. The defense's argument held weight, considering the numerous errors committed during the handling of Elaine's case. Not only was there a lack of proper forensic equipment and knowledge on how to handle a crime scene at the time of the incident, but it was later discovered that the officers had also failed to wear protective gear while collecting evidence. Furthermore, the credibility of the witness testimony was called into question. Martin Brown, the eyewitness in question, was colorblind when he was asked to examine black and white photographs of individuals resembling the perpetrator. He was able to eliminate all but 3 individuals, initially identifying someone else in his statement before eventually naming John Dougherty. Brown's credibility was further undermined when he revealed that it took him a decade to come forward because he had only recently recognized Elaine's face in a newspaper and realized that she was the same woman he had seen on the night of the incident. The defense argued that it was unjust to blame Dougherty, as the news of a contaminated crime scene had not been disclosed prior to the trial. They claimed that the officers handling the case were negligent and could have mishandled the DNA sample, leading to a match with Dougherty due to contamination. However, their argument was swiftly dismissed when the forensic scientist responsible for the crime scene testified that it was 560,000 times more likely for the DNA found at the scene to belong to Dougherty than any other unrelated male. Despite the counterarguments, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, resulting in John Dougherty being declared guilty by a majority verdict. This case became one of the longest-running cases in Scotland, with the culprit being apprehended after nearly 3 decades thanks to DNA evidence. In 2014, Dougherty was finally convicted in a high court in Edinburgh and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 21 years by Lord Advocate Frank Mulholland. Mulholland justified the severity of the sentence by emphasizing the brutality of the crime. Elaine Doyle, who was simply walking home that night when she became a victim of this heinous crime, had her brother, John Doyle, express his belief that the sentencing was appropriate and just. He further clarified that despite the lengthy process of obtaining justice for his sister, they found solace in the fact that she could finally find peace. On behalf of his mother, he acknowledged that the pain of losing a loved one never truly fades, but the resolution of the case provided a glimmer of hope amidst their sorrow. The family expressed gratitude for the apprehension of the perpetrator, as it brought a sense of closure. However, their grief was compounded when John Doyle's 17-year-old son, Jack, was tragically stabbed to death in Greenock in 2012. John's father, also named Jack, was unable to bear the loss and subsequently passed away, adding to John's immense devastation. Despite the overwhelming sorrow he had to endure, he remained thankful that at least one of the culprits was apprehended and brought to justice.
Let's travel back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, on October 22, 1984, when the city was left baffled as 18-year-old Annette Craver disappeared without a trace. The police searched the area in an effort to find the truth, but they were unsuccessful, and the teenage married girl's whereabouts remained a sinister mystery. Despite the fact that her disappearance remains a mystery, the police were concerned that it might actually have been a horrifying homicide. It turned out that this situation was much more complicated than it seemed. In the long run for justice, a man was found at the center of it all, and for an incredible 54 years, his perverted viewpoint would prevail over the pursuit of justice before justice finally prevailed. What might have happened to Annette, a young, beautiful teenage girl? Why did it take so long to solve the mystery of this chilling case? Who was this maniac that took her away? Hello, and welcome back to Mystery Detective, where we explore dark and sinister stories around the world. Stay with us as we walk you through this 54 years mystery and 2 other eerie mysteries that are closely related to this terrifying case. Tulsa, a city in Oklahoma, is captivating with a distinctive fusion of tradition and modernity. This city, which is tucked away in the middle of America, offers a vibrant way of life that is enriched by its varied cultural scene. Tulsa is renowned for its exquisite architecture, well-preserved art installations, vibrant performing arts community, and succulent barbecue restaurants. The city is also well known for its long history of oil production and for being the birthplace of the famous Route 66. Tulsa has battled crime despite its accomplishments. The city's violent crime rate exceeded the national average in 2020, making it one of the most dangerous cities in the country. Further emphasizing the negative aspects of the city, Tulsa also saw the mysterious disappearance of Annette Craver. Annette Michelle Craver was born on December 7, 1965, in Houston, Texas, but little is known about her early life. In 1979, when her father tragically died in a car accident, things took a significant turn. The heartbreaking incident had a negative impact on Annette's emotional health. Annette's mother, Mary Rose, observed a noticeable shift in her daughter's behavior, noting that she became more reclusive and frequently turned to solitude for comfort. Annette was by herself a lot of the time. She was constantly creating art and writing poetry. She would also occasionally pick up a guitar. Mary was aware, deep down, that her cherished daughter had been experiencing great hardships as a result of her father's passing. A significant event took place on September 8, 1981, when Mary organized a yard sale in Houston to sell her late husband's possessions. 15-year-old Annette actively helped her mother sell off her father's possessions. Despite her lack of expression, it was clear that Annette had not yet recovered from the devastating loss of her father. Mary worried about Annette's isolation and loneliness, but she was unaware that Annette wasn't actually feeling lonely. Unknown to Mary, Annette had been involved with a charming man who had a sizable age difference. In addition to being older than Annette, the man was even older than Annette's mother. Mary's first encounter with Annette's friend, 40-year-old Felix Vale, occurred at the yard sale. Mary didn't suspect anything and never entertained the thought that there might be more going on. As Felix approached Annette to talk, Mary noticed the obvious age gap. Mary struggled with the burden of financial difficulties following the death of her husband. After finding it difficult to find employment in Houston, she considered moving away in search of work and better opportunities to give her daughter a better life. Mary overcame a number of obstacles and was rewarded for her perseverance when she received a job offer in Oklahoma. But there was still a lot to worry about. Annette, who had already missed 2 academic years, was about to receive her high school diploma. Mary was aware that her daughter's academic progress might be jeopardized by a sudden move to another state. When faced with this decision, Mary went with her plan of action. She asked a friend for help in taking care of Annette while she relocated to Oklahoma in search of employment. Although the plan seemed good at first, it soon started to fall apart for Mary. As time went on, a growing worry became apparent. The bond between Annette and Felix appeared to have grown stronger while she was away. As she watched the 40-year-old man become more involved in her daughter's life, Mary couldn't help but feel uneasy. This was a circumstance that greatly disturbed her. After Annette graduated from high school, Mary was able to buy a new home thanks to her diligent saving. She registered the house under both of their names, with the hope of reuniting their lives and living together once again. Mary's thoughts of a long-awaited reunion were dashed after she learned that Annette had left when she got back to Houston. Mary discovered that after Annette graduated high school, Felix immediately suggested a road trip to her. Captivated by his charm, she happily accepted his offer. Over the course of 1983, Mary did occasionally get letters from Annette, each coming from a different place. Then one day, a call from her daughter, who was at the time living in California, arrived. Hearing from Annette gave Mary a rush of happiness, but the conversation quickly became concerning. Annette, who was only 17 years old at the time, asked her mother for permission before she married Felix Vale. Annette seemed to have already made up her mind, despite Mary telling her daughter it would be a mistake to marry Felix, advising her to wait until she was at least 18 years old. Annette allegedly declared her love for Felix Vale and intended to wed him in Mexico. Mary struggled with a difficult decision, knowing that she might lose her daughter, who was very involved with Felix. She was aware that refusing a daughter she hadn't seen in a while could have its own effects. She consequently gave the marriage her approval with a heavy heart, believing her daughter to have good judgment, and not realizing Felix was a bad man. But the perfect married life Annette had pictured would soon start to fall apart. Annette opened up to her mother in letters written shortly after their wedding. She revealed that Felix had changed unsettlingly, becoming more and more domineering. She shockingly revealed that Felix had even forced her to have an unauthorized abortion after learning she was pregnant with his child. Mary begged Annette to come home right away, consumed with worry for her daughter's safety. Annette eventually mustered the strength to escape Felix's grip in 1984 and made her way back to her mother. However, when Mary finally caught a glimpse of her daughter, she couldn't help but notice that she had changed. Annette had lost her identity. She was constantly perplexed by everything. Mary believed that her daughter was simply overwhelmed by Felix's attempts to manipulate and control her life. Mary found comfort in being reunited with her daughter amidst the changes. But this joy was short-lived. They were unhappy not long after Annette returned. Felix began tormenting their home with relentless phone calls and his insistence on speaking to Annette. Mary was unmoved and maintained her position, determined to defend her daughter at all costs. However, things got worse in October 1984, when Felix was able to breach Mary's house's perimeter, boldly entering without permission and making his way up to Annette's room. The two spent some time talking privately in Annette's room. When they eventually came out to Mary, they would say something that would break her heart. Mary was sternly instructed to leave the house by them. Mary tried to patch things up with Annette, despite her heartbreak, but her efforts were in vain. Annette remained controlled under Felix's sway and was unresponsive to any opposing viewpoint. Mary gave up her share of the home as a result, packed her belongings, and moved to California with a heavy heart. The nightmare did not end there, though. When Annette turned 18 years old, she made a big decision by claiming the inheritance her late father had left for her. Surprisingly, she allegedly transferred all the money into Felix's account and gave him legal ownership to her home. Mary attempted to contact her daughter after learning of this worrying development, but for some reason she was unable to reach her. She then wasted no time and contacted Felix right away. Felix asserted that Annette had requested going to Mexico on her own and that he had put her on a bus. On October 22, 1984, Mary immediately called the police and reported her daughter missing. Following receipt of the missing person report, the Tulsa police moved quickly to speak with Felix Vale, in an effort to gather any information they could. Unfortunately, the police were also manipulated by Felix, just like Annette. Mary had a strong hunch that Felix was concealing the truth and had a significant role in Annette's disappearance. Despite her convictions, the police were persuaded by Felix's remarks and gave up looking for Annette Craver. Felix was successful in persuading the authorities that Annette had left alone, on her own volition. Mary was left feeling helpless and clinging to the steadfast hope that her daughter would one day return after being repeatedly ignored by law enforcement regarding her daughter's disappearance. She sat by the phone for years, hoping Annette would call to say hi on special occasions, like her birthday and Mother's Day, but sadly, nothing ever happened. By 1991, a startling 7 years had passed without a significant development in the search for Annette Craver. Mary wrote hundreds of letters in an effort to contact the police, but neither they nor the FBI were interested in getting back to her. Even Felix didn't respond to the letter she sent him. Mary had the sobering insight that depending on others would be fruitless. She made the decision to conduct an independent investigation due to her tenacity. Mary initially tried to learn more about Felix using the developing internet's resources, because she was convinced he held the key to Annette's disappearance. However, there wasn't a lot of online information available in the 1990s. Mary's unwavering diligence allowed her to track down a single but crucial lead, which was Sue Jordan, Felix's sister. Mary traveled halfway across the country to meet her, spurred on by hope and the potential for learning crucial information. Mary was informed by Sue Jordan that Felix had a wife who had drowned. With the help of this promising information, Mary was able to locate Mary Horton Vale's family in Louisiana in 1993. Mary Horton Vale was Felix's first wife. Her efforts paid off when she was able to track down Mary Horton's brother, Will Horton, who had only been 15 when his sister tragically drowned in the Calcasieu River. Will Horton described his sister with a warm heart during Mary's encounter with him. He said, "My sister was so very special, so thoughtful and kind." He spoke of her with fondness. Felix Vale, his brother-in-law, was not accorded the same sentiment though. Will Horton revealed that his family had a clear grudge against Felix. Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale's ancestry can be found in Louisiana, where she was born on February 16, 1940. She assumed the position of editor for the school newspaper. She was also named the Eunice High School Homecoming Queen. When she was attending McNeese State College in 1960, to further her education, her path crossed with Felix's. Amazingly, the two exchanged wedding vows just 6 months after they first met. In 1961, their union produced a child. Bill Vale, their son, was welcomed into the world by Mary. Felix, however, acted otherwise. With the birth of their child, Felix's attitude changed noticeably. He began to treat his first wife with a controlling attitude, much like he did with Annette later. He even threatened her, telling her what would happen if she got pregnant again. Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale became pregnant once more the following year, despite Felix's warning. Felix was enraged by the news, driving her to seek safety from his fury. She and her son Bill fled to her mother's house out of fear of his wrath. Mary Horton considered divorcing Felix, but her mother advised her to go back and try to make amends with him. Mary's life tragically ended before they could settle anything. On October 28, 1962, Mary Horton and Felix Vale went fishing along the Calcasieu River. In an unfortunate turn of events, Mary drowned to death. Felix described what happened when he was questioned by the police. According to him, Mary allegedly drowned after she unintentionally fell off the boat. The Horton family, however, remained dubious of this account and found it difficult to believe. Felix quickly rose as a top suspect in the investigation, as a result of the murky circumstances surrounding Mary's drowning. She was found dead in a place that was unsuitable for fishing. After being found 2 days later, her body underwent an autopsy, which turned up red flags. Mary had bruises on her neck, right calf, and left leg, which suggested that she may have fought before being forced into the water. Authorities discovered a scarf that had been wrapped around her neck and put in her mouth, suggesting traumatic asphyxia, a type of suffocation. This discovery provided additional damning evidence. The detectives were confident Felix was the murderer in light of the mounting evidence, but the coroner had a completely different take. He thought the evidence was insufficient to convict Felix. Felix also vehemently denied being guilty. He was released in January 1963 after a Calcasieu parish grand jury declined to indict him. At the time, Mary Horton's family was devastated and felt cheated by Felix's release. Mary Rose, Annette's mother, was more enraged by what she had heard as Will Horton broke down, relaying this tragic information. Will described how the loss of his sister devastated their mother and left a void in his heart that would never be filled. At that point, Mary Rose's pursuit of justice included a steadfast search for justice on behalf of Will's sister, Mary Horton, in addition to her daughter. Though before the two women could receive justice and the police could be fully involved, Mary Rose understood the need for more concrete evidence than just statements. Thankfully, she was no longer fighting for justice by herself. Will Horton tells Mary that since 1975, he has been getting calls from people asking about a girl who vanished in Sulphur, Louisiana in 1973. The fact that the girl in question was Sharon Hensley, Felix's ex-girlfriend after Mary Horton, added to the unsettling nature of the situation. Sharon Hensley's mother called for years to inquire as to whether Sharon had been seen. Mary Rose began a new journey in her search for knowledge. She soon understood that her daughter was not Felix's only victim. In 1994, she made her way to Bismarck, North Dakota, to meet with Sharon Hensley's brother Brian. Brian characterized his sister as independent. In the summer of 1970, Sharon Hensley, who was born on December 20, 1948, left her home in Bismarck, North Dakota. She aimed to welcome a new beginning in her life as she joined other free-spirited people who are forging their journey in the wake of the renowned Summer of Love. Sharon Hensley's ultimate destination was San Francisco. She was able to accomplish her objective, but the reality that met her was a far cry from the idyllic life she had imagined in her North Dakota sanctuary. Her path instead took her to Felix Vale. Felix at that time adopted an unconventional lifestyle and embraced a nomadic existence after the death of his first wife. During this stage, he even assumed the persona of a traveling preacher and founded his own personal cult group called the Holy Order of Mans. During this time, Sharon Hensley, then age 21, met Felix. In 1972, 2 years after leaving, Sharon visited her parents' house in Bismarck with her new boyfriend, Felix Vale. But their daughter had undergone a change. The once vivacious North Dakotan girl who loved to dance and hang out with her friends now seemed distant. Her parents were worried that her independence was being supplanted by the influence of her new boyfriend. Her parents were uncomfortable after the meeting, but Sharon, who was an adult, decided to leave with Felix. She had the freedom to choose her own course of action. Nevertheless, her parents' concerns grew more serious. They believed Felix was exposing their daughter to a dangerous lifestyle, one characterized by drug use and irresponsible conduct. But not even they could have predicted what lay in store for the future. In a short period of time, Sharon joined Felix's cult group and interacted with them. Her involvement, though, came at the same time as the dramatic change in their relationship. At the time, Felix's drug use increased and his behavior changed, becoming more violent and domineering. During those times, Sharon's family thought she was with him out of fear. She had no idea how to escape the predicament. Along with Felix, Sharon was about to travel to South America. But before beginning this journey, she called her mother one last time to say goodbye. Her mother sensed something was wrong, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Her maternal instincts were spot on, because after that final communication, Sharon stopped calling or writing. She disappeared with no trace. In a letter to Sharon's family in 1973, Felix claimed that he had last seen Sharon in Key West. His story was that she had left him and gone sailing around the world with an Australian couple. The Hensley family, however, had skepticism about everything Felix said, as was a common theme in all of these cases. In February 1973, Sharon's family reported her missing, but regrettably, the police did nothing for a full year. A dated newspaper report filled the gap, even though there were immediate investigations or initial police support. The story from the old newspaper caught Brian Hensley's attention. The news report from 1970 mentioned Sharon and Felix's arrest. According to the report, a young boy of about 8 years old showed up at the police station and asked for help to go back home. Bill Vale, the son of Mary Horton and Felix Vale, was revealed to be the child. Bill, an 8-year-old boy, went to the police station without shoes or socks and complained that his father was forcing him to smoke marijuana and that he wanted to return home. The Horton family was unaware that Felix had taken Bill with him when he left for California, following Mary Horton's passing. Bill was compelled to follow his troubled father wherever he went from that point on. Additionally, the police discovered that Bill had a history of violence. The police also discovered that Bill had experienced abuse during this time, before escaping and making his way to the police station. Felix and Sharon were detained for endangering a child. However, it is unknown how the two managed to escape the police custody. When Mary Rose heard about all of these things from Sharon's brother, she made the decision to meet Bill Vale. She thought Bill might be a source of vital information because he had valuable knowledge about where Felix was. With this goal in mind, Mary set out for Kansas to meet with Bill and his family. Mary Rose said Bill was very honest. He treated her with a lot of kindness and sympathy. Mary observed that despite being a good man, he was terrified of his father. Bill was initially apprehensive to share much information for fear that doing so might unintentionally bring Felix closer to his own wife and kids. But his desire to help Mary and obtain justice for his mother won. Bill made the decision to seize this opportunity after realizing its importance. He gathered the courage to divulge the dark secrets that might support Mary's claims. Bill described an important event that happened in 1970, just before he fled and arrived at the police station. He had unintentionally overheard his father, Felix, and Sharon talking to each other. Bill claimed that Felix admitted to Sharon that he had killed Mary Horton, his mother. Bill sought refuge with his grandparents after Sharon and Felix were detained in 1970, which resulted in a significant change in his life. Despite this alteration, he continued to be afraid of his father, especially since he was required to testify against him in court throughout the trials. This fear of his father's return increased his anxiety, and tragically, Felix did return in 1975. Felix arrived at Bill's grandparents' house and asked to see his son. The fact that Sharon was no longer with Felix added to Bill's fear, which was already strong. When Bill inquired about Sharon, Felix responded that Sharon would never bother anyone again. Bill, who was only 13 years old, understood what he meant, but he had no way to put that knowledge to use. At the time, he was unable to speak to anyone about his father's sinister behavior. Bill struggled with the worry that if he shared these revelations, Felix might hurt his family. His desire for justice, however, was stronger. Sadly, Bill's battle with cancer claimed his life in 2009, preventing him from seeing his mother's justice served. Bill, however, made sure to meticulously document his account of Felix's confession before he passed away. He asked the local preacher to write down his story so that the truth would be preserved for future generations. After a while, Mary Rose felt she had something important enough to ask the FBI to reopen the case. Although she was aware that there was no physical proof, she clung to the belief that the testimony of the Hortons, Sharon's brother, Felix's son, Bill, and herself could possibly give her the evidence she needed to pursue justice for her daughter. Mary had the opportunity to speak with a special FBI agent who dealt with cold cases and serial killers. He accepted Mary's account and determined Felix was a serial killer. Tragically, the cold case department took the brunt of the budget cuts, and the agent who had demonstrated support for Mary's cause was let go. Due to this unfortunate turn of events, Mary's quest for justice had no way to be furthered. She awoke to find herself exactly where she had started. Mary felt guilty for having inspired all the families to pursue justice. The families who trusted her, though, knew she wouldn't give up. Even though the conversation fizzled, Mary kept looking for someone to assess their situation. She simply felt a strong desire to put Felix behind bars. Over the course of nearly 30 years, Mary had been gradually worn down as a result of her resolve to fight for justice. While listening to the radio in June 2011, Mary heard about a detective who had solved 8 murder cases involving the infamous burning Mississippi murders, which were carried out by the Ku Klux Klan. Before he cracked them, these cases had remained unsolved for 50 years. The knowledge of this gave Mary the additional push she required. Mary immediately set out on a quest to find the investigator's contact information. Fortunately, she was able to find his phone number. Jerry Mitchell, a resident of Mississippi, was this person. Mary informed Jerry Mitchell about the cases and soon learned that Felix Vale had moved to Mississippi. As a result of this realization, Mary was faced with a decision she had to make. Mary Rose and Jerry Mitchell traveled through Mississippi in 2011 in order to reach the crucial spot where the criminal was. They arrived at a remote and desolate trailer park. Jerry wondered if Felix was watching them as they highlighted from their vehicle, but Mary didn't seem to care. She merely wished to put an end to Felix Vale's chapter. They noticed a broken window as they neared the trailer house. Mary crept through the window to enter the room in search of the truth, without thinking twice about the danger. Jerry couldn't believe his eyes when she started throwing out machetes a short while later. Mary rose, and Jerry saw someone rushing in their direction as they looked around the house. But it wasn't Felix Vale. Rather, it was K.A. Faulkner, his sister, who appeared to be upset at their sudden intrusion. However, when Kay found out why Mary and Jerry were there, her initial anger at their unforeseen presence quickly subsided. When K.E. Faulkner was spoken to, she admitted that she thought her brother had murdered those women. Only one day into the investigation, Jerry Mitchell recognized the quick progress made and seized the opportunity. He started by speaking right away with Mary Rose, the Hensleys, and the Hortons. As a result of these testimonies from the victim's family, in 2015, the book titled Gone was published. This book painstakingly documented the family's experiences. It received numerous awards and a great deal of immediate acclaim. The FBI became aware of this book, and after carefully considering all the relevant information, they decided to reopen the investigation. Mary, who had struggled for a long time, at last felt true happiness. Mary Horton's case was given priority by the FBI after a careful review of all the information that was available, primarily because her death had been officially declared, unlike that of Sharon and Annette, whose bodies had never been found. The problem was that this case had been going on for more than 50 years, which had led to reports and data being lost over time. The FBI persisted in their search for a district attorney who would be willing to take on this challenging old case, and they eventually found the right candidate, Hugh Holland. After reviewing the case, Hugh Holland didn't waste any time in sending out a squad to raid Felix's house. Authorities discovered Felix Vale's nearly 2,500-page journal. They learned from reading the journals that Felix made a conscious effort to dominate every woman in his life, frequently using physical force. Felix wrote about how he even enjoyed drinking raw blood in the journals, but there was nothing pertaining to the killings. Since Mary Horton drowned in the Cocossia River in 1962, Holland and his team decided to find someone who might have any information regarding the incident. Surprisingly, they discovered a man named Ike Abshire, who was 90 years old. Felix Vale and Ike Abshire shared a room when Felix Vale lived in Lake Charles. Ironically, Ike's father had a lot of boats and was a member of the search team that the sheriff's office hired to look for Mary Horton's body. Ike was on board in his father's boat when Mary's body was found. As they were talking during their meeting, Ike Abshire, who was in a wheelchair, handed Hugh Holland an envelope with the word "Keep" written on it. When Holland opened the envelope, he took 2 pictures out, and they turned out to be pictures of Mary Horton's body on the day it was discovered, showing severe bruising and wounds. When Holland finally came to the realization, he grabbed the photos and started his examination. Holland was working on the case in his office when a pathologist happened to walk by. "Who murdered her?" the pathologist said as he bowed down to look at the pictures. That was sufficient evidence and confirmation for Holland to declare Mary Horton's case to be a homicide. Now armed with sufficient proof and strong evidence, Holland quickly filed charges against 76-year-old Felix Vale for the murder of his first wife, Mary Horton. In a fitting turn of events, Louisiana, the very location where the case had started, became the location where it finally came to an end. 2014 served as the year of judgment when Felix Vale was captured and taken into custody. The disappearances of Sharon and Annette were also brought up during the trial. After all, Felix Vale was the last person to see them both. Holland asked Ike Abshire to testify because he understood how important his testimony was to the case, and that it will be the most important piece of evidence used throughout the entire trial. Ike Abshire died at his home on May 17, 2014, from old age, nearly 3 months after giving his testimony. However, during the court proceedings, his testimony proved to be the deciding factor that all doubts were dispelled. The jury only needed about 10 minutes to reach a conclusion. Felix Vale received a life sentence after being found guilty. When Felix was found guilty, Mary Rose, Brian Hensley, and Will Horton, who were among the audience, breathed a sigh of relief. Mary and Brian were relieved that Felix was held accountable for his actions, finally receiving the punishment he deserved, even though his involvement in Annette's and Sharon's disappearance could not be proved. Brian Hensley was finally able to hold a memorial for his sister after the verdict. It makes no difference to the victim's family whether Felix was found guilty of killing just Mary Horton or all 3 women. What matters is that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. After Felix was taken into custody, justice was served, and Mary Rose's tenacious pursuit was rewarded. However, the emotional scar on her heart never fully healed, serving as a constant reminder of the agonizing pain she had experienced. Writing letters as if they were meant for Annette to read helped Mary cope with her lingering guilt over abandoning her daughter because of work, and she did so in the hopes that one day she would be able to move past it and eventually forgive herself. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts with us in the comments.